Welcome to Lede Family Live. I'm Jason Lede, and it's my pleasure to come into your homes tonight in the virtual sense to talk about some wonderful wines and bring on some guests from our winemaking team to talk about the wines tonight. A couple of quick things to touch on before we bring our first guest on. If you're one of our wine club members, thank you so much for your loyalty and your support. Just a reminder that you can log on to your account and check out the wine club newsletter for this month. It's got obviously some great descriptors on the wines, more information on the wines, great recipes from Lynn up at Poetry Inn, Chef Lynn. I believe there's a lamb pizza pairing that goes with the high fidelity. Might have to talk to my wife about trying to make that one because I really do love that high fidelity. If you've watched these in the past, you know that's one of my favorite wines. So check out the newsletter. Also, to anyone that's going to join us this weekend for our Valentine's party, we look forward to having you. We're going to have both the 09 Songbook and the 2019 as well. So we got those wines on the program tonight, but we look forward to seeing you on Saturday night. And if you're not going to make the Valentine's party, maybe we'll see you in May. I believe, just sent out the save the dates, or the save the date is live on our website for our rock block party, which is always a fun event. Always some really fun music and food. Obviously, lots of rock block series, Cabernet Sauvignon. So we'll have some great library releases available this year. And we're just starting to put our ideas together for how we're going to make it a really awesome party. So save that date. It is coming up in May, and I cannot wait for that. So that's all the time I'm going to take for that, other than saying come visit us. We'd love to see you, love to have you come out. It's a beautiful time of year, as I've mentioned. Our first guest tonight is going to be Sarah Green from Fell Wines, winemaker over at Fell Wines, and we'll talk about the Anderson Valley Chardonnay and then the new release of the Heritage Clones Pinot Noir from the Savoy Vineyard. And then after we chat with Sarah, we'll have Travis Bullard from Cliff Lede, the winemaker from Cliff Lede, join us to talk about the Cliff Lede wines. So let me see if I can get Sarah on here, and we'll start tasting some wine. And for all of you who are watching tonight, we love seeing, we love hearing from you in the chat. So if you're drinking anything great or have anything great lately, any questions you have for myself or our winemaking team, throw that in the chat so we can keep this as interactive as possible. But Sarah, welcome to the program. It's great to see you. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Can't complain. I love doing the webinar. I get to taste some great wines and talk to some people that know way more about wine than I do. So it's always an exciting night for me. So thanks for taking the time to join us. How are things going over at Fell? What do you guys, what's been going on? Did you guys just run some bottlings and aren't some new things happening there?
Yes, we just bottled the whole 2021 vintage of Pinot Noir, as well as the 2022 vintage of Pinot Gris. That's always the first wine of the vintage to make its appearance of the new vintage. And our vineyard designate Chardonnay Savoy 2021 Savoy. So we were really busy getting all that together, and now we catch our breath for a moment.
Nice. Well, we've got some great I got a 2021. So you would have bottled this, I guess, last year, maybe around this time, or
just before harvest. Yeah.
Just before harvest. So 2021 Chardonnay, Anderson Valley, always known as kind of the clean, crisp, delicious style of Chardonnay. What can you tell us about this wine? What makes it special? What makes it unique? And why do you love it so much?
Well, I would first and foremost, I'd say this wine's a very familiar face to me. I would say this is my house wine. You know, when I'm not drinking coffee or not quite enough water, this is the wine that I have on the go. So it's a familiar face to me. Anderson Valley Chardonnay is of course a blend, as distinguished from the other Chardonnay that we make, the vineyard designate Savoy. So this is really a wine that's a great way to think about Anderson Valley. So backing up for a second, Anderson Valley, 200 miles north of us here in the North Bay, and it's a valley that runs southeast from the town of Boonville, northwest towards the Pacific Ocean. And so this blend is really a wine that captures that whole kind of journey up the coast towards the ocean. So it's supported really by two sites. The first is Farrington Vineyard, which of course we make a vineyard designate Pinot Noir from. And that's situated right in the town of Boonville in the kind of inland, warmer part of the valley. And then the other vineyard that supports the blend is the Hind Vineyard, which we lease. So that's situated in what we think of as the deep end of the valley, the sort of cooler part towards the ocean. And so together, these sites really capture what the valley is about. So you get from Farrington, you really get this bright kind of primary fruit. And then from the cooler climate sites further north, you get the really driving, bracing acidity. And as a vintage, the 2021 wines are, of course, affected certainly by drought was kind of the main feature of that vintage. But both these sites handled drought really well. Farrington is a pretty mature site, and the older vines are really well suited to handling kind of whatever comes their way. And then Hind Vineyard is a really kind of vigorous site that kind of doesn't seem to matter, what's going on. It sort of always seems to set a really healthy crop. And so the main way we saw the drought impact those vineyards was smaller crops, smaller clusters, and smaller berries. And anytime that's the case, you're sort of happy winemakers, So we've what we call high skin to juice ratio. So we know we're going to get great concentration and great texture. And so that was really true across the 2021 vintage, both in the Pinots and the Chardonnays. And the winemaking with the Anderson Valley Chardonnay is really all about elevating the primary fruit character. So this wine never sees any new oak, and it doesn't get any malolactic fermentation. So we're not getting any influence from new barrel, and we're not getting any of the kind of broadening character that malolactic fermentation tends to bring to a Chardonnay. So it's really about elevating the kind of pure, zesty, bright characters of those sites. And that makes it a wine that's really approachable, kind of goes with everything.
I love it. It's a great wine. Stylistically, over the last few years, I can see the consistency. We have a question though from Mark that I'd like to throw your way. He's asking, how do we get the wine so clear? And so I would think, it's a young wine, so it hasn't really had time to start showing some of those, color qualities, those deeper color qualities. But I guess the way I would ask the question is does the winemaking have an impact on that as well? So the use of, neutral oak for a short period of time or no malolactic, does that change the color at all? Or what would you answer that?
That's kind of a tough one. I mean, most white wines are going to produce a liquid that has almost no color. I mean, there's times when it looks almost like water. What's really amazing is that when the juice comes in, it's like dark brown, especially the way that we make it. So we really like to, use as much, we call it high solids winemaking. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of handle the juice at that stage. But we tend to kind of push it pretty hard because we love the textural quality that comes from kind of pushing the skins. And so the juice that comes out is really dark brown. And as the fermentation progresses, it kind of gets lighter and lighter shades of yellow. And so you get to the kind of end of the fermentation process, which is a few weeks usually till it's done. And you've gone from something that's super dark brown and tastes kind of almost, got a ton of sugar in it to a pale yellow. And then as time goes by, just with gravity, those solids settle to the bottom and you end up with, something that has almost no color at all. And the lees, which is those solids settling to the bottom, they do still stay quite dark. So when we empty the barrels and bring it up to tank, we've got this clear wine that looks like what's in your glass, and then the kind of the sediment on the bottom is often still quite a dark yellow. So whether that's to do with the kind of the pigment in the skins and the solids, but yeah, it is kind of surprising that it changes so much.
Yeah, and then over time, right, it will eventually develop a
certainly as there's sort of oxidation character that that often we hope will be many decades before you're really starting to see that color change. You know, if you think about the kind of the great aged white wines of the world, the Rieslings and the Sauternes, they obviously have that kind of, they take on that character in the kind of sort of oxidation process. But we'll, you know, in their youth, we would be very concerned to see that at this stage in the wine, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks. Great explanation. And let's taste some wine that has a lot of color. Let's taste this beautiful 2020 Heritage Clones from the Savoy Vineyard. I was telling Ryan the other day after tasting this wine with staff that I had just had the 2019, and then so it was a few days later had the 2020, and I was struck with how consistent the expression was between the two vintages. So my question for you on this wine is, did the blend change at all with the clones that you use? Because I know we have a number of these California Heritage clones on the vineyard. So now that we're in our second iteration, is it still kind of the same with, I believe it was Mount Eden or Martini that was leading the charge? I'll let you take it from here, but that's my question.
It's a little different. It's a little different, but it's
Okay.
pretty consistent. I mean, they're all planted kind of right together. I would say of the 5 of the California Heritage clones we have planted, the Mount Eden definitely is often kind of a winner, certainly in my heart. But they're all really strong. So I think that the Mount Eden is kind of the core of it in both vintages, with some slight, you know, with some flavor coming from a few other sites. I love a few other clones. I love talking about this wine.
I should just quickly point out, just so everyone kind of knows what we're talking about, right? We're talking about clones, types of Pinot Noir, right, that we planted on the vineyard, and we do a specific selection of those clones for this wine. So that's why it's different from our typical Savoy, which includes all the different clones on the vineyard. This only uses clones that are, I guess, native to California. Is that more or less how you would explain it?
Yeah, sort of. That's a good way to think about it. I mean, to back up for a second, you know, for several decades, the kind of dominant clonal material, so again, all Pinot Noir, but just different clones, that we kind of were making a lot of Pinot Noir from, were what we were calling the Dijon clones. So, you know, associated with that part of France. So, you know, clones like 777 and 115, and we still make plenty of Pinot from that material. But in the last decade, there's been a kind of interesting turn back toward the clones that sort of put California Pinot on the map, and they carry the names of those producers that really paved the way. So things like places like Calera and Swan and Mount Eden, Martini, those are sort of really like important names in the history of California Pinot Noir, and these are sort of the clones that are associated with those sites. So the kind of the adaptations from the vines planted at those sites, and they've turned out to be really well suited to lots of sites, but to Savoy, it was a really kind of a revelation to start working with these new clones for Savoy. So these, you know, backing up a little bit, the history of Savoy, you know, being planted in the 90s and 2000s, it wasn't until 2014 that we started kind of doing some replanting and redeveloping. And that's when we, you know, sort of kind of made this sort of turn towards the California Heritage clones. And we didn't have our first harvest from those blocks until 2017, which was actually my first vintage as well. And, you know, when you've got baby vines, baby fruit, you don't always know what you're working with. It seemed like it was off to a great start, but as a couple of years went by, we really felt like we had kind of found something special and something new at Savoy that really deserved to be highlighted. So, you know, we often think of the mainline Savoy as a really spicy wine. It's kind of got a little bit more of a savory character, and we love that, but that is just not what's going on here at all. These younger vines with this kind of classic California history behind them. It's all about, you know, fruit intensity, brightness, freshness, and we just really wanted to showcase that. And so it's something we have a lot of fun putting together every year, because you know, those are really fun barrels in the winery to put together. And the other thing I would add about this wine is, not unlike the Chardonnay you just had, there's no new barrels here. And this wine was sort of a turning point for us in realizing that the sites we work with have so much character and polish, and we wanted to really focus on that purity and not kind of have any distraction from the barrels. And so it was really the heritage clones blend kind of coming to fruition that paved the way for us in that process.
Nice. And you gotta take credit for this, right? This was your idea to make this wonderful wine, no new oak, but just let the purity of these clones come through. I gotta applaud you for that, because this wine is just fantastic.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'll happily take credit, but it all happens that me and Ryan in the back of the barrel room with a thief. That's where the ideas are born. So I'm glad it's been such a success.
It's delicious. I don't even know what else to say. What would you do? What would you think in terms of like aging on this wine? Because right now I'm like, oh my God, I just want to drink this whole, well, maybe not the whole bottle, but maybe half a bottle. I could do that. Delicious. Where do you see this going in the next 3 to 5, 10+ years?
Well, one of the things that sets it apart from a lot of Pinot Noir is it's got a lot of acid, and I think certainly as a winemaker, I feel like the magic combination is when you have fruit concentration and high acid, because you can have a wine with great fruit concentration, but that's often going to be in your riper styles with less acid, and those wines might pack a real punch up front, but then not really hold up as years go by. So when you can get that fruit intensity and you can have that beautiful kind of concentration and purity, but you still have a lot of brightness and edges from acidity, you have something that's going to kind of hold up beautifully. So I'm excited to watch it age. Another thing is that going forward, we've made some big packaging changes. And by changing the cork that we're going to be using going forward, we're looking at really exciting aging potential on all the wines. So I think this is something that's gonna reward. If you can stand to hang on to it, you'll be happy.
Nice. And real quick on the Chardonnay, what would you think age-wise on that wine?
Well, it's for me, it's hard to find a well-made Chardonnay that I don't love from kind of any age. So same concept with all that acid. That's something that's going to hold up really well. I think ideal drinking windows can vary so much depending on what you're looking to get out of a wine. So in the first 5 years, you're going to get all the primary characters, and it's going to be as a couple of years start to go by that we start to develop those tertiary characters that we talk about, the kind of bottle aging qualities. So once you get past those first 5 years, you're going to start to take on those characters, and they're not for everyone, but I love to see where white wine, especially high acid white wines, go with that time, the kind of richness that picks up. So if you can keep a bottle of Chardonnay around for more than 5 years, good on you.
I gotcha on that one. That one's not going to last long. I'll probably be wrestling Travis for that bottle at the end of the night. Maybe both those. But hey, thank you so much for coming on and giving us some background to the wines. Got some great comments about the wines. Sorry, everyone, that the chat was disabled. I did get it working again here, but we have some great comments, Sarah, from Karen, who met you, I guess, at a August dinner event last year. She said you were awesome. She loved talking with you, and she's going to stock up on those Fel Pinot Noirs. Kristen has been texting me, Kristen, our wine club manager, and she's saying there's only 20 cases and it is a wine club exclusive for the Heritage Clones. So get that wine while you can. It's not going to last long. I'm probably going to be good for a couple of those cases. So yeah, get on it. Anyway, thanks again for your time, Sarah. Hope to see you soon, and have a great long weekend.
Thanks, Jason.
All right. Well, our next guest here it has been patiently waiting, sitting here, but helping me enjoy some wines, taste some wines here in the Cliff Lede, the White Room, as I mentioned earlier. Are we close? I think we're close. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Always trying to get this figured out. This is not a professional film crew, as you can imagine. We're just making it work. So this is Travis Bullard. He is the winemaker for Cliff Lede Vineyards. Travis, you've been with the Cliff Lede winemaking team for what, 20 years? No,
Yeah.
just kidding. 10, at least 10
10
vintages
plus,
now.
yeah.
How many vintages though?
This 22 was my 13th.
13,
vintage, I
lucky
think.
number
Yeah.
13. There you go. So
Mhm.
everybody say hi to Travis. You've probably seen him on the program before. Responsible for making things happen here at the winery and working with Chris Tynan, our director of winemaking, to make some exceptional wines at Cliff Lede. And we have 4 amazing wines we're going to taste tonight from the Cliff Lede portfolio. And we talked a little bit before we started, like, what wine are we going to start with and how are we going to start this conversation. And I think everybody here knows how much I love High Fidelity. So we're going to start there because I'm just ready to taste this wine. This is going to be the 2019 Cliff Lede High Fidelity. Always a fun wine to taste from our portfolio. I believe the first vintage of this wine we made was 2007. Has gone through somewhat of an evolution over the years. Some years it's more Merlot based. It's more recently been a little bit more Cabernet Franc based, but always sort of a tribute to the great wines of the right bank of Bordeaux. So while many of the Cliff Lede wines are Cabernet Sauvignon based, thinking, left bank Bordeaux, this is the one wine we make that's, tipping our hat to the right bank. So being highly faithful to the region, high fidelity, you get it. 2019, believe we've talked about this vintage quite a bit over the past few webinars. I don't know what else there is to say. It was
a beautiful year.
Just perfect,
It was
right?
a dream. It was a dream vintage for a winemaker to make wine. We just had really even moderate temperatures the whole year, all through summer, no heat spikes, and that persisted all the way through harvest, which basically means that there was no rush to pick the fruit, and we were able to pick basically every block of fruit at the exact time that we wanted to. So it was really an uncompromised year of winemaking.
Right. So you didn't really have to like rush things, through the winery or anything like that. And decision making was easier. Was there anything tough about 2019? Maybe it was tough doing the blending because there's so many good components, or like, was there anything hard?
We have hard vintages, so we don't really complain ever when we get a year like 2019.
Right.
We just smile and we say thank you.
Well, I can say that any 2019 I've had from you guys, like whether like, first of all, obviously Crossfade, working on that wine with you guys was a total pleasure. But I've like just loved tasting and drinking that wine over the last, year and a half now. The Stag's Leap District Cab, now the High Fidelity's finally released. I mean, I just feel like these wines all have this like lovely approachability and this prettiness and this lift to them, this like nice acidity, like almost what Sarah was talking about, just 2 minutes ago, about having fruit and acidity and at the same time is kind of key with just the most perfectly dialed tannin profile. So what are you picking up in the High Fidelity? What maybe is different about this year than other years?
I think kind of what you touched on, like in 2019, a little cooler year, like we have this beautiful natural acidity in the wines. But with that, like even ripening, like there's also like really intense fruit flavors. So that kind of is what sets the 19s apart. I think they're going to be a really beautiful year for aging, for laying down. So if you pick up extra wine, if you like something, I would consider getting a couple of extra bottles because you can lay this down. It's going to age really beautifully. Hi-Fi, I think, is kind of like the one underrated wine, I think, in our portfolio.
Under the radar, maybe. Yeah.
It's like a little bit of a dark horse, but it's really fun to make. It's really fun to drink. It's got this, since it's Merlot and Cab Franc based, the tannin structure isn't as intense that you would get in some of the cab based blends that we make. So, if you're a person that likes like a little more velvety, softer mid palate, a little more approachable in its youth, like this is the wine that I would go to.
But still, I think you're describing it perfectly. But the concentration that you look for in, say, like a Cabernet, the intensity of fruit, the power, so to speak, is there, but it doesn't have that grippiness that Cab would have. And I love that, I appreciate both for different reasons, but this is certainly a wine that maybe has a little bit more versatility food wise too, which I love about it. Anytime that I remember, in my tasting room days when we'd pour this at the end of the day, if there was some of this left over, I was like, I'm taking that home, because it doesn't matter what we were cooking that night. I was like, I know High Fidelity is going to work because it just has that breadth.
Yeah.
Man, this is tasting great. I know a lot of our club members and even the staff has been waiting so long to finally release this wine.
Yeah, we've leaned a little
Yeah.
more on the Cabernet Franc in the past couple of years to give it like that kind of fruit aromatic lift on the nose. And this wine always kind of has like a red fruit quality. So there's a lot of like cherries and kind of strawberry and vanilla, maybe like black mission fig.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking
And but then there's also like a little bit of the dried leaf and fennel character. So like there's
fennel,
yeah,
sure.
so some of that Franc kind of plays in with like not a vegetal green note, but kind of like dried tea leaves. And
I got to go to the Travis School of wine tasting and descriptors, because Black Mission Fig is not something that immediately comes to mind. I don't even know if we had those in Canada. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't, but not growing up. All I can say is this wine's delicious, whether you pick up on the Black Mission Fig notes or not. I think you're going to love it. So hopefully you're excited about that. And this one does have the pairing in the Wine Club newsletter as well. So keep that in mind if you're looking for a fun thing to do this weekend, long weekend for some, hopefully all of you. Get that recipe, crack open a bottle of your High Fidelity, and you got a great night right there. Maybe a late Valentine's Day celebration, something like that. Shifting gears a little bit though, we're gonna taste the next wine, which we figured we would jump over to the Stag's Leap District Cab and start, making our way back in time. This is the 2014 Cliff Lede Stag's Leap District Cabernet Sauvignon. So this is a library release that some of our club members had access to, and I've personally always loved the 2014s. I found them to be, just very approachable. Not like maybe it's because it was bordered by 13 and 15, and 15 being a really intense concentrated year. That maybe going to take even longer than normal to kind of really come into its own. Whereas the 14s just kind of always were just really wonderful. So looking forward to stepping back in time here. What do you remember from the 2014 vintage?
14 was kind of like the start of our drought years. So we had a little bit of rain in the winter, but not a lot. And then no big heat spikes during the growing season. So the growing season was pretty moderate, but since it was so dry, we had these really naturally low yielding vines and very small concentrated berries. And I think that's kind of what reflects on these wines, is there is like a lot of power and flashiness in these wines. Certainly in their youth, right out of the gates, the 14s were drinking really well. And now that this has like a couple of years on it, I think you still get a lot of the power and concentration in this wine.
Yeah, it seemingly has aged, in very gracefully. There's not really I'm not picking up any like secondary notes or anything like that yet. Like it still has a lot of primary fruit.
Sure.
Maybe there's a little black licorice in there. Do you get that?
Yeah,
like
sure.
That's maybe starting to come out a little bit more.
It's very chocolatey. Like I was thinking like dark chocolate cocoa nib.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Yeah. It's like a bitter chocolate in a really nice way.
Tons of structure. Like I think of all the wines that we're gonna drink tonight, like if you are a fan of your Napa cab with steak, like if you're gonna have a ribeye or something, this is the wine that can still hold up to that. And I think would show, wouldn't get bowled over by a big steak.
It's a great bottle. Gosh, I would
lots of black fruit, right? Lots of blackberries and blueberries,
and just another 10 plus years of kind of this prime before maybe getting to a tertiary stage where I often say you just pair it with the glass and you don't even have to really think about food at that point.
I think it kind of depends on how people like to drink their wine.
That's true.
But, I mean, this is, if you like drinking your Cabernet young, like this is in a great window right now.
I drink a lot of old, Bordeaux with my dad, and I have no problem drinking old California Cabernet. We'll say that. So I'm going to say, another 10, 15, 20 years on this, no problem. I'm really impressed actually. Given how approachable this was upon release, which I think this was the first vintage I sold when I started here officially
Okay.
and was on the road selling wine. This was one of the first vintages. I think I maybe started with 12 or 13, and 14 was one of those vintages that you just pulled the cork, poured, and people loved it. So nice to revisit it. I think it's in a great spot.
It's interesting tasting this like right after the new hi-fi, like how much more tannin, grip, and structure this has. Which, I think maybe we can talk a little bit about the winemaking. So
yeah, please, you're the winemaker. I mean, you're here. Tell us. With
these different blends, like really the winemaking, as far as handling the fruit in the vineyard and handling the fruit as it comes in during harvest, is all the same. So, everything is handpicked at night. It's all coming through our optical sorting system and hand sorting in the winery. Everything's kind of going individually into tank and around 30 days fermenting, and then it's all going to French oak barrels for about 20 to 22 months. So when you pick up on these like massive differences on these wines between the SLD cab and the hi-fi, you're really showcasing like the different characteristics of those fruit. In the winery, we're trying to preserve that character. Everything that we do, every idea that drives our winemaking style is basically to preserve like the character that we taste out in the vineyard and kind of usher that all the way into bottling. And then we do get to sit down and blend these wines and maybe like showcase kind of what we were seeing in the vintage. But as far as like the handling and the winemaking, it's all very similar from one wine to the next for Cliff Lede.
Yeah, and then you sit down and you blend these masterpieces. I love it. It's always fun to sit down on the blending sessions and realize that winemaking certainly is an art form, and these guys are artists. They're geniuses when it comes to that. To be able to piece all these little things together and make these wines that, I mean, here we are, right? Years later, tasting a vintage that, I mean, you would have blended this, what, 2016, 2015, I guess 2015, 2016, you would have been working on that.
It would have been bottled in.
And, having the foresight at that time to make a wine that, down the road was going to taste as good as this tastes today. So congrats on that. When did you open that, by the way?
I opened that about 2.5 hours.
2.5 hours ago.
Yeah.
So if you're having that wine, give it at least a couple hours of air. Throw it in the decanter if you have one.
Sure.
It'll certainly help out. So we're going to continue going back in time, step back to the 2009 vintage, which Travis was not here for, unfortunately, so he can't tell us about, regaling these stories of 2009, but we can talk about Songbook, which makes one of our Platinum Series wines, the name of one of our Platinum Series wines. This wine often comes from sites in the northern part of the Napa Valley. The Madrona Ranch Vineyard, Thorvilos Vineyard likely involved in 2009. So we look at this wine as a compilation of vineyard sites that together tell a really compelling story. So not so specific, say, as poetry is, poetry being specific to our hillside, or Tokalon being specific to that vineyard. Songbook kind of brings a couple different things together to tell, again, a more compelling story. So 2009 library re-release. Why don't you taste it? Kind of tell us what you're thinking about that, about the vintage. Were you making wine in 09?
Yeah, I was down in Paso.
Oh, okay.
Paso in 09, so working on Syrahs.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I do know, there was it was kind of similar to 19 in that it was like really dry winter, but a little bit of rain in spring. And I do know that we had a big storm in the middle of October. So for the Cliff Lede wines, these were all harvested before that rain event. So it was a little bit of an earlier ripening year, and we were able to get all that fruit in before there.
I might challenge you on the steak, the grippy steak question. This has some grit. This has got some tug to it. This would be great with some barbecue or something like that. In a great spot too, right? Starting to get a little bit more of that dried fruit quality, but
all the
dried cherry,
the secondary, tertiary flavors are starting to come in. There's still like a little bit of like red currant.
Yep.
So there's a little bit of primary fruit in there, but there's a lot of like cinnamon and toasted cardamom, like lots of spice. It's very savory.
It is. I get that savory note. I was trying to think of like what that could be. I just kind of think of like, it's like a woodsy, almost like like cedar maybe.
Yeah, or like a dried forest floor.
Yeah.
Like not damp, and a little bit of licorice too.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa Brown did a vintage reflection on this and called the 29s graceful.
Graceful.
So I think that's a good.
I find this wine actually to be a graceful wine for the set. So we just recently tasted through a lot of the older, I guess they weren't that old, but like the 12, 13, right. 14, 15, Songbook, Toklon, Poetry. And this wine always kind of struck me as the one that is a little more softer from that bunch, right?
Sure.
Poetry has that trademark Stag's Leap District, like the Velvet Glove, you know, that we always talk about, and Toklon being 100% cab. Obviously, a lot of structure there. This tends to show a little bit more, I don't know,
velvety.
Yeah, velvety. Yeah. That's a great descriptor.
Yeah, I'm always surprised when this songbook comes together because we're blending multiple vineyard sites that you'd think would have more tension in this wine, but they integrate together seamlessly. So it's really beautiful when this comes together.
Wow. 14% Cab Franc this vintage, 80% Cab.
Yeah, and only 230 cases. So
yeah,
very
small.
Yeah, really small production. It's kind of incredible if we still have library to sell.
Right. I think 07 was the first vintage of Songbook too. So, you know, one of our earlier years. Nice to look back at that. Tasting great. I'm going to showcase it this weekend at the Valentine's dinner again. If anyone's coming, you get to taste that with us. Look forward to that. I think we're opening some large formats too. So always fun to taste the wines from a, you know, bigger bottle because they tend to age a little bit differently, right?
Yeah, a little fresher.
Okay, and then the last wine for this evening is the 2019 Songbook. So this is, wow, this is going to be released fairly soon, I believe. This is more or less a bit of a preview. This weekend, the Valentine's dinner, of course, again, tasting this wine and pairing it up with some great food. But we're not going to talk about how great 2019 was again, because we already talked about how epic it was. But why don't you tell me a little bit more about, you know, when you guys sit down to blend this wine and also touch, I guess, on this wine. One of the unique things is one of the new vineyards that's involved, right?
Yeah. So this is, yeah, exactly. So with the Madrona Ranch, which is kind of on the west side of St. Helena, tucked up against the foothills, this also has a big percentage of the Abreu Lucia vineyard up in Howell Mountain. So it's right next to, it's actually right next to the airport. Up in the little town of Angwin.
Yep.
Yeah, so this has, maybe the difference here is we started using a little higher percentage of cab in this year. I think the cab was so beautiful in 2019. You know, a lot of times we'll use some of the other blenders to like finish out the wine, make it more complex, like make it more of a complete wine and kind of soften a little bit of the edges, and then also like fill in maybe some of the places where we think the wine is missing. So, you know, if it's if it's a year where the cab maybe isn't as strong or powerful, like we can add a little more Petit Verdot. That's going to give it a darker color. It's going to give it more structure, darker fruit profile. But you know, in the 2019, like it was such a great year for cab in Napa, and it was so beautiful. It was, you know, we're able to use like a higher percentage of that and still get this concentrated, full, complete wine.
So try to break down, if I'm smelling Howell Mountain in the glass, what would I look for? If I'm smelling Madrona Ranch, what would I look for?
Sure.
And how would those come together?
Yeah, you know, it's kind of hard with David Abreu because the vineyards are so meticulous. You know, I feel like his Howell Mountain, the fruit that we get off of that vineyard isn't as typical to a normal Howell Mountain vineyard. I find more rustic in their tannins. Certainly, we'll get a little bit lower acid off of that Howell Mountain site. So when you're up at that elevation, you know, you're not retaining the acid as well as you are down in the valley. So that gives you, maybe that's a little more of the plush mouthfeel that you're getting is coming off of that. And like I said, the tannins off of that site aren't as aggressive. So I think that's kind of why those vineyards play well together. And then, yeah, off of Madrona, a lot of the fruit, like high fruit berry flavors. So a lot of the blackberries, currants and stuff, like you're getting that kind of off of the Madrona Ranch. That's what we look for.
Nice.
And then a little more of the acid structure. So like that side of the acid in this wine is coming more from the Madrona Ridge than from Helmholtz.
Nice. Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, gosh, aging potential on this 20, 30
Yeah,
years.
it really
easily.
jumps out of the glass, right?
It does. The aromatics are certainly profound. Certainly see some what is that, like raspberry in there? Like almost like a tart, it's like a tart raspberry note.
Yeah, a little bit of like cassis, maybe. I think there's lots of dark chocolate and cloves and anise in here too, and blueberries.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a wine that's still very like, holding itself.
Tightly wound.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, I'm not ready yet.
Yeah, I think that kind of speaks to maybe what Sarah was talking about earlier, like when you've got that, you've got that acid structure and then lots of concentrated fruit, like that's what you're looking for. With the cabs also, we've got the help of tannin structure to help us push through aging. So
yeah. Well, I'm gonna check the Q&A real quick, make sure we didn't miss anything there. It doesn't look like it. We covered all those questions. Oh, here was a question from earlier that we'll cover. And by the way, if anyone has questions, now's the time, throw them at us. Question around the rainfall this year and how will that affect the 23 vintage. Had a lot of rainfall this year, which is a great thing. Happy about having lots of rain. How do we anticipate that'll impact the 23 vintage?
I think we're like around average rainfall in Napa for the year. So we got a lot of light rainy days. So it rained for like whatever, 2 or 3 weeks maybe here, for a really long period of time. But like we didn't have any like really huge rainfall days. So we're kind of like on average, which is technically above average because we've been stacked up with so many drought years. So we're really happy with the amount of rainfall that we got. I think in this season, like in kind of like late winter, getting a lot of that rain that can push off like bud break. So we can it'll be a little later ripening season for us potentially. And then you can see like a little more fruit set with this much water. So in the vineyard, we always farm them to really meticulous standards. So we're always dropping fruit and thinning to a certain yield that we think the vine will be able to handle in each vintage and basically produce the best ripe concentrated berries. So, in a year like this, where maybe we do have more crop on the vine, like the vineyard crew will go through and drop a little bit more fruit if they think the vine won't be able to handle it. So,
right.
Those are kind of some of the things that we'll basically augment.
It's all good news, but more rain would be a good thing, right?
More rain, a little bit more.
We're not ready to
first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what do we got from Tony here? He's like, show us the bottle, show us the bottle.
Which one?
I gotta we need a little stand, Tony. We gotta invest in one of those, get a little thing there so I can just sit like that. So that's for you, Tony.
We're torturing him, which is the top.
I know. He's like, what is it? What is it? Oh, that's the good stuff in there. Well, guys, if that's all the questions for tonight, then we'll probably let you all go. Appreciate you all participating with us in the chat there. Got some folks from Minnesota. Skull. Hey, cheers. I'm gonna be out in Minnesota. When am I gonna be there? September, I'll be out there. So we'll definitely send an email out when we finally have more details around where I'll be and what events we'll be doing. But I'm gonna be in New York this year, gonna be down in Southern California, Missouri, gonna be all over the place, and our winemaking team out there as well. So keep an eye out for any emails regarding that. If we're gonna be in your town, we'd love to hang out with you and have wine dinners, events, whatever. Come and see us here. Obviously, there's a lot of fun stuff going on in the Valley all year long. If you haven't been in a while, a lot has changed, and it's just a really fun place to come hang out. So think about it. Come see us. Hope you're enjoying all the wines we're sending your way. I guess we'll be back in April to talk about the April releases, some fun stuff coming out, new rock block coming out in April, which will be fun. And I think we'll get to talk about 2019 vintage again, which is awesome. But thank you all so much for your time tonight. Thanks for supporting us. Really appreciate it. And stay in touch. Shoot us an email if you have any questions, comments, concerns. And that's going to be it for tonight.
Yeah. Cheers,
Thanks
guys.
for coming out, Travis.
Thanks
Appreciate your time. Mm.